So this is Fibonacci Vibe. We are listening to the very simple demo voice inside of it, but it's not really meant for the demo voice. It's meant to be a gate sequencer for external gear based on the Fibonacci series of numbers. Now I'm showing it off in ZBoo, and there are some features that are specific to ZBoo, but it does output MIDI. And I did notice as I was preparing this, one thing that I forgot to add that you would need to use it in ZOIA if you wanted to use just tap tempo as a tap tempo. This is done on the utility button here. We can tap in a tempo. I didn't include something like that that would show up in ZOIA, but I will before I publish this. I'll add that after I finish shooting this video. So just be aware that will be on this page somewhere. But anyhow, it can output MIDI or gates. And again, it's based on the Fibonacci series of numbers. So again, if you have ZBoo, you can mute all the tracks really quickly using this button, but you can also mute individual tracks or turn them on by pressing these buttons. That's true on ZOIA or ZBoo. They're on both. And an interesting fact, if you are on ZBoo, this works by flipping the state of whatever tracks are on. So it can actually be a fun performance tool. So those are the mutes. I don't know why I started there, but I started there. So there are 4 tracks, handily color-coded, and on each track you have 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and 34, the first 8 numbers of the Fibonacci series. Now, if you, let's turn on track 1. We'll just listen to one track to start with. So if I put a trigger on 1, it will play on every step, or on every beat. 2, it'll play on every 3rd beat. 3 on every 3 beat. We can have more than one of these active, as I just did. So if we have 2 and 3 active, we have 3 beats in a row and then a rest, and so on with 2 and 5, and you can get some really fast variations on rhythms this way. Actually, I don't know how well the kick is coming through. Now that I think I'm going to switch to one of the brighter tracks. Maybe turn it up a little bit. I turned it down because there were multiple drums playing. But anyhow, we can put triggers on 2, on 3, and we can put them on multiple triggers on the same track. But there are also a couple of other ways to get some interesting variations out of this. Along the bottom, you'll see that there are these 4 buttons, and each of these corresponds to one of the tracks. They're not color-coded because they're going to change colors in a second, so there's no real way to do that without making it seem like I was, well, anyhow, there's no way to do that. So we can change these combine modes, is what I call them. And basically what they do is they combine the triggers that occur at the same time on a track in different ways. So we've been listening to OR, which is the bass mode. OR just means any of the triggers that you hear will come through. So this is OR. The next one is XOR. Which means that the triggers will only occur when other steps aren't active. And the last combination, or the last combine mode, is AND, which means that the steps will only be active when another step on that row is active. So with those, not only do you get some interesting ways to combine these Fibonacci numbers to generate interesting rhythms and quickly, you can also get variations on them pretty quickly because, I'm going to unmute some tracks again, and that means I need to turn down the volume again. I'm just going to So I can get some variations on those patterns. Pretty quickly. The OR mode will have the most triggers. The others will have less because their conditions depend on the states of other triggers in that row. There are some additional features that I think just sort of add something. So we have these choke options. And this causes, if I turn on choke for track 1, let me mute some stuff. So we're just listening to track 4 and track 1. And if I turn on chokes for track 1, what happens is the output of track 4 chokes track 1. And track 1 will choke 2, 2 will choke 3, 3 will choke 4. So they go around in a circle. But that allows you to do, you know, some really interesting dynamics between them. And again, just create some more variety very quickly. And then the final controls are swing. Add swing, we can make it really swung, or just a little swung. And that's positive or negative, we can swing either way. And then I have this control I called Slop, that's sometimes called humanize in other contexts. But it basically adds Slop basically adds a randomized delay at the end, which will push notes off the grid because they're delayed by random amounts. And it can give sort of a loose vibe. This control is scaled in such a way that slop occurs more often and more dramatically as you move to greater amounts. So just a little bit, you might not even notice. It'll just give a sort of looser feel without being loose like swing gives a loose feel. But as you start to push it, it becomes very noticeable. Yeah, where'd that beat go? So anyhow, that's just a fun option to play with. And again, I think a little bit can really give, you know, some flavor to this. I think that's really all there is to talk about. Again, the internal voices are not interesting, but we can look at them if you want to mess around with them. There's somewhere in here. I probably skipped past them. Demo. Yeah, so noise goes into some bandpass filters, multi-filters, and then into VCAs. And the VCAs are triggered by envelopes. You can change the frequency and resonance of these if you want. But again, I intended this for external gear. I don't know why I'm going over this. I just sort of, you know, it's a thing. So this is Fibonacci Vibe, which again, I think the really fun part about it is how fast it is. And I was sort of surprised I began this as an experiment because it was like, maybe Fibonacci numbers are useful for something. I mean, but in the context of ZOIAing. And I was sort of surprised at how well this works for generating rhythms on the fly pretty quickly and offering variations on those rhythms. So, you know, any generator is going to be a compromise between, you know, control and speed. And I think this one does a decent job of walking that line, of giving you controls that are useful so that you can quickly dial something in at the expense of maybe, you know, it's not like sitting down and programming, you know, drums on a timeline or anything like that. It's a different process. So anyhow, that's Fibonacci Vibe. So take care.